for joining us tonight. So I'm going to start off this conversation by giving you a brief personal story. So many years ago, I started off as a baby engineer right out of college, and I was working in this big refinery. Very intimidating. There was one manager with 40 to 50 engineers working for him, so there wasn't a lot of hand-holding or direction. So I was assigned to what's called the coker unit, which is a big unit at the refinery. And my partner engineer, my co-engineer on the unit, was a guy named Josh. Josh had a bad reputation for being a stereotypical engineer, non-personable. The operators hated him because he was always running these fancy simulations, these fancy models, and telling them to tweak their distillation columns so that they're, to match his model. Operators hate that because, as we all know, real life is not like what you learn in the textbooks, and so he wasn't sensitive to that. So he was very technically savvy. So when I had projects to get done, I knew that I depended on Josh for help. So before I could ask him for help, I had to use lots of persuasion and my interpersonal skills to encourage him to help me. So we bonded over silly things like dogs and beach vacations, and that's how we kind of became friends, and we formed a relationship that made him want to help me. And so when I asked him for technical help, he was always very quick to help. A few months go by, and he actually comes to me for help. So this whole time I had no idea that he was actually learning from me also. But what he realized was that I had a way of motivating people to do what I needed them to do in a nice way by connecting with them and then leading. So Josh started coming to me saying, okay, I have this idea, my model is showing this, I think it's really gonna work, help me convince these operators to do this. So we would come up with ways to word things and ways to make the operator think that it was their idea, which is the best way to get somebody to do something. And over time, they had a new respect for Josh, and we're listening to him, and he learned his communication skills. So really what was happening is I was using my strengths to compensate his weaknesses, and he was doing the opposite to help me. So as it turns out, what was happening, the collaboration between Josh and I is actually something that it has a name, and my buddy Scott is going to tell you more about that.
Thanks, Jennifer, for that insightful story. I guess I can see how you've convinced me to do all your work throughout this entire class. What Jennifer was describing is something that Lauren Johnson describes as lateral leadership in her HBR article, Exerting Influence Without Authority. So basically, lateral leadership is described as being extremely important because business is becoming very dynamic, and we need to learn to influence our peers to act on our behalf and get projects done, because in business nowadays there's a lot of cross-functional teams, a lot of using subcontractors, and the way lateral leadership evolves and becomes important is through networking and gaining relationships with peers, not just subordinates. You learn the ability to persuade and negotiate as constructive, not just manipulative like you would with subordinates. Lateral leadership also brings in consultation, kind of talking together in teams and getting things accomplished, which is building coalition, which is power in numbers. So after you discuss these things laterally, you approach them with numbers and are able to get projects done in a way that wouldn't be able to accomplish without it.
Business is becoming more and more dynamic every day, which makes Lauren Johnson's concept of lateral leadership that much more important. So the ability to tap into your interpersonal leadership skills, and connect with your peers and your colleagues to mutually work together and accomplish tasks and goals in a timely manner is becoming more and more prevalent every day because, tasks are being outsourced and, coming from different departments, like Scott just said. But the main thing to take from this article is that even though you are not in a formal position of leadership, you may not have a formal title through your employer, you are always in a position of leadership to influence others, your peers and your colleagues, and how they perceive you to carry yourself and the perception of knowledge that you have. So this is important because you have no formal authority over them, you have no power of authority over them to get them to do things, so it's important to influence them to get things done. Thank you.
That's a wrap.